We hear it all the time. You're in an echo chamber. It's become this go-to criticism, right? It's how we talk about news in the digital age. But what if that whole diagnosis is wrong? What if the problem isn't the chamber itself? This story about former President Trump, it perfectly captures that anxiety we all feel. The first reaction for a lot of people is, see, total echo chamber. He's just sheltering himself from any criticism. It seems so obvious, doesn't it? Well, in this explainer, we're going to get into the work of philosopher Jennifer Lackey, and we're going to seriously challenge that assumption. So here's our roadmap. We'll start with a diagnosis we all know, the echo chamber. Then we'll look at the standard reasons why we're told to worry about them, and then we're going to flip the script and look at it from a completely different angle. We'll pinpoint what the real danger is, introduce a brand new player in the game, and talk about how we can possibly navigate this wild new reality. Okay, so first things first, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. When people throw around the term echo chamber, what are we actually talking about? It's basically a closed loop, right? An idea gets bounced around and amplified inside a network. Could be your social media feed, could be a 24-hour news channel, and any voices that disagree are just gone. They're tuned out. It sounds bad, and it's almost always used as a knock against someone. But why? Why is it considered so terrible? Well, the case against echo chambers really boils down to two big philosophical arguments. Let's take a look at the first one. The first major worry is that echo chambers create this false sense of support. You know the feeling. You see an article shared 100 times in your feed and you think, whoa, everybody agrees with this. But what if all those shares really just trace back to one single source? The philosopher Wittgenstein had this fantastic way of putting it. He talked about someone trying to confirm a story by reading a bunch of copies of the exact same newspaper. It doesn't work, right? 1,000 copies of one paper doesn't give you 1,000 new pieces of evidence. It's just one piece repeated over and over. And that's the fear, that social media shares create this illusion of independent agreement. Okay, so the second big criticism is all about insulation. The fear here is that if we only listen to people who already think like us, we never get our own beliefs challenged. And that, supposedly, is really dangerous if you're trying to find the truth. And this is the classic defense of free speech, summed up brilliantly by John Stuart Mill. His whole point was that truth emerges from the clash of different ideas. If you're stuck in an echo chamber, you miss that collision entirely. You miss the chance to sharpen your own views or, to realize you might be wrong. So there they are, lack of independence and lack of diversity. That's the standard case against echo chambers. But here's where we pivot. Are those two criticisms really the slam dunk they seem to be? Let's start to poke some holes in this conventional wisdom. That whole lack of independence argument, it kind of assumes that we're all just blind followers, just parrots echoing what we hear. But that's not really how people work. A much better model is something called autonomous dependence. We aren't just copy machines, we're actually human filters. And that filtering process, that adds real value. Think about it. Every time someone you trust shares an article, they're doing this, whether they realize it or not. They're judging the source, they're checking it against stuff they already know, and they're putting their own credibility on the line. So 200 shares isn't like 200 copies of the same newspaper. Nope. It's one report that is passed through 200 different human filters. And that's valuable information. Okay, so what about that lack of diversity argument? Well, is all diversity good? Really, if you're trying to learn about climate change from a leading scientist, does adding the opinion of a random conspiracy theorist actually make you smarter? Of course not. A diversity of unreliable sources isn't helpful. It's actually worse than just sticking with one reliable one. And this brings us to the crucial turning point. If being in a closed system structurally isn't the core issue, then maybe we've been looking in the completely wrong place. So what is the real danger we should be worried about? The argument here is that we've got to shift our focus. We need to stop worrying so much about the structure of our information networks and start paying a lot more attention to the content that's flowing through them. It's not that you're in an echo chamber, it's what's being echoed. Let's circle back to that Fox News example. The problem isn't just that it's one network people are watching. The problem is the reliability of what's being said. According to a pundit fact analysis mentioned in the source material, just 10% of statements made on air by Fox News pundits were rated as true. Just 10%. And this just brings the point home. You had a guest at one point claiming asylum seekers were bringing smallpox into the U.S. Smallpox, a disease that was globally eradicated in 1980. This is a demonstrably, wildly false statement. And when that's the kind of content being echoed, that's when the chamber becomes toxic. And online, this whole problem gets put on steroids. A massive study of Twitter found that lies just spread way farther, faster, and wider than the truth does. As you can see here, the truth rarely got to more than 1,000 people, while the biggest fake news stories reached between 10,000 and 100,000. And the crazy part? The study found that humans, not bots, were the main culprits, because we're more likely to share stuff that's new and surprising, even if it's false. But just when you think it can't get any more complicated, it does. Because it's not just humans we have to think about anymore. There's a totally new player in this information game that changes everything: social media bots. I mean, just look at this statistic from a Pew Research Center study. It's staggering. A full 2/3, that's 66% of all the links to popular news sites tweeted out there, come from automated bot accounts. These aren't people. They're what the source calls fake news approvers. And this is exactly why bots are such a game changer. Remember that whole human filter thing we talked about? Well, bots don't have one. They don't have beliefs, they don't check for reliability, they have zero responsibility. They just amplify, 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 creating this illusion of a massive consensus that doesn't actually exist. They completely break our normal rules for how we trust information. So let's just recap. We have unreliable content that spreads like wildfire, and we have non-human actors making it all worse. This is not the world John Stuart Mill was writing about. This new reality demands a completely new set of skills. So what's the solution? The idea is that we have to move past these old theories of ideal, polite conversations. We need to develop what's called a non-ideal epistemology, basically a toolkit for finding truth in the messy, uncooperative, and sometimes non-human digital world we actually live in. It means learning a new kind of digital literacy, where we question not just the content, but the consensus around it. And this leaves us with a pretty fundamental challenge, doesn't it? Our old ways of figuring out what's true are being pushed to the breaking point. So the crucial question for all of us now is this. In a world filled not just with fake news, but with faked approvers, how on earth do we even begin to learn to trust again?